A test cross is a breeding experiment used by geneticists to figure out the genotype of an organism that shows a dominant characteristic, but we are really not sure what the genotype can be. Take a look at the example on the screen. Here we have, once again, Labrador dogs. Brown coats are recessive to black coat. And so if you see a dog that has the brown coat, we know for sure what the genotype is. The only way these dogs can be brown is if they have inherited two recessive alleles which produce the brown coat. But that is not the same certainty we can have if we look at a black dog. If you're just looking at the dog and you can see the beautiful black coat that they have, you don't know what is the assortment of alleles this dog has inherited. Why? Because this dog can have two capital B alleles and have a black coat. But he could also have a dominant black allele and a recessive brown allele and still have the same intensity of the black coat. And so how can you figure out exactly what the genotype is for an organism that shows a dominant characteristic? The answer is do a test cross. This experiment has one requirement, and the requirement is that the individual with the dominant characteristic must be crossed with a parent, another individual, that shows the recessive characteristic. In other words, if it shows the recessive phenotype, it has to be a homozygous recessive individual with regards to its genotype. And so that's exactly what we're going to demonstrate here in this illustration. Black coat dog. We don't know the genotype. Brown coat dog, yes, we know the genotype, homozygous recessive. So we've met this condition. Now what you have to do is allow the animals to breed and see the outcome. For this black coat dog, if it's a homozygous dominant, there's only one type of gamete that can be produced. All of the sex cells produced by this black dog would have the dominant black allele. For the homozygous recessive parent, again, only one type of one type of gamete can be produced. All of the sex cells produced by this individual would have the brown allele. And so when you cross a gamete with the black allele and a gamete with the brown allele, all of the offspring are going to have one of each type of allele, but because the capital B allele is present here, these dogs are going to be black. If that's what you see in your cross, as these dogs are crossed maybe 2 or 3 times, and all the puppies turned out to be black all of the time, then you can be fairly certain that the dog in question is going to be homozygous dominant. But this dog could also be heterozygous and have a black coat. If that was the case, when this dog produces sex cells, half of the sex cells will contain the black allele, and the other half of the sex cells will contain the brown allele. Now remember, we're still using our homozygous recessive parent, the one that can only make gametes with the brown allele. So that's why we only have here one gamete shown. If the capital B goes with the lowercase b, then you're going to have a heterozygous individual with black coats. But now, if this black dog is a heterozygote and also carries one of the recessive alleles in its genotype, now it's possible for the gamete containing the brown allele to go with the gamete produced by the other parent with the brown allele, and lowercase b will produce some of the offspring with the recessive phenotypic trait. They would be homozygous recessive. Now, it doesn't have to be that half and half of the offspring are going to be, half are going to be black and half are going to be brown for this possibility of the black dog being a heterozygote. You can have, for example, a litter of puppies where you have 4 puppies and 3 of those are black and 1 is brown. This dog will still be a heterozygote because the only way one of its offspring showing the recessive characteristic is if the parent itself carries one of the recessive alleles. That is what we can explore further by doing the answering the questions. One of the worksheets I handed out in class. So now I'm going to be changing what I'm displaying on my screen and share with you the image of that assignment. That did not work. Here we go. All right, so if you haven't had the chance to pull out your paper yet, you can pause the video. You can go retrieve your worksheet and then resume the video once you have it. You ready? Okay, here we go. Let's take a look at this scenario we have here. Number one, recall that brown coat color in rabbits is dominant and white color is recessive. Suppose you have a group of rabbits. Some are brown and some are white. The first question is, for which phenotype do you know the genotype? Remember the strategy that I proposed you should always follow whenever you're working with any of these breeding problems or genetics problems. And I told you the first thing you want to do is figure out the genotypes of the parents. Always begin there. So we have brown coat rabbits, and I'm going to see if I can annotate now. Okay, so here we go. So we have some brown rabbits, and we're going to have some white rabbits. The symbol we're going to use for brown is going to be capital B because we know that brown is dominant. So for the brown rabbits, they could have two different kinds of genotypes. They could be capital B, or they could be capital B, lowercase b. Two possibilities can be identified for the brown rabbits. For the white, the only way they can be white is if they have inherited two of the recessive alleles, which result in the white coat. So now that we have identified the genotypes for the parents, let's go back over here. So we have brown rabbits and we have white rabbits. And the question is, for which phenotype do you know the genotype? Remember, imagine you're looking at the group of rabbits. You're looking, some are brown and some are white. The only ones you can be certain what the genotype is going to be these white rabbits, because the only way they can be white is if they have two of the recessive alleles. Which phenotype is the question? So our answer has to be in terms of phenotype. White. What I'm answering here is that we know that the white phenotype is the one we know the genotype. It's going to be this lowercase b, lowercase b. For which phenotype are you unsure of the genotype? And our answer here is going to be brown. Why are we unsure about the genotype for the brown rabbits? From the outside, they look brown, but inside, we don't know if they're homozygous dominant or if they are heterozygotes. Then the next part says here, I'm trying to, this is not letting me scroll down. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm making a mess. Science in action, that's what it is. Now I'm changed it to, okay, so now I can scroll. And the program is being kind of slow. Oh, but it's leaving the marks behind. Hold on, let me pause this for a moment. Okay, I'm back. I apologize for that. Okay, so now the next set of questions is, what are the possible genotypes for a white rabbit in your group? And we had already specified what the genotypes would be. White rabbits are going to be lowercase b, and the brown rabbits are going to be capital B, lowercase b, and then they could also be capital B and capital B. Now let's look at the next question. Suppose you wanted to find out the genotype of a brown rabbit. What color rabbit would you mate it with? Remember what was the condition for doing a Testcross? Think for a moment. Oh yes, you remembered it. We have to have an individual with the homozygous recessive genotype. In other words, the phenotype has to be recessive. So we need to cross a brown rabbit with a white rabbit. in order to do a test cross. Let's look at the next question. Brown buck, remember I told you before, that's what we call male rabbits, is mated with a white doe, that's a female rabbit. In their litter of 11 young, 6 are white and 5 are brown. Use a Punnett square to check your answer. What is the genotype of the buck? Do we even need to do a Punnett square in this case? Look, if you have a brown rabbit and some of the offspring are white, the only way this rabbit can have white offspring is if he himself or she, herself, carries one of those recessive alleles or white alleles. So this brown rabbit here has to be a heterozygote in order to produce offspring with the recessive characteristic. Next, it says use a Punnett square to figure out the ratio of brown and white offspring that would have been produced by the above mating if the brown buck had been homozygous. And again, all you have to do here is, if the brown buck is homozygous, this is capital B, and you're crossing it with a homozygous recessive white rabbit. The offspring of these crosses we've seen before is going to be, all of the offspring will be the heterozygote type. And so, again, there's almost no need for doing a Punnett square here. If half of the offspring from a test cross are of the dominant phenotype and half are of the recessive phenotype, is the parent of the dominant phenotype, this will be a brown rabbit, remember, showing the dominant phenotype, but unknown genotype, well, we didn't know that, homozygous and heterozygous. If some of the offspring are homozygous, then this rabbit here has to be a heterozygote. And the last question here, if all of the offspring from a test cross are of the dominant phenotype, is the parent with the dominant phenotype but unknown genotype homozygous or heterozygous? If all of the offspring, if all of the F1 are heterozygotes, then the brown rabbit we began with has to be capital B, homozygous dominant. What I recommend you do is save all the questions you have and bring them to class. We can address more of the uncertainties you can have when we meet again at the next class period.